Hey, my name is Kobe Maddox, and this is my final presentation for stats. In this video, I'll be exploring the question, does training frequency affect perceived progress among recreational fitness enthusiasts? This project investigates whether the number of training days per week is associated with an individual's satisfaction with their physical progress over the past 3 months. To do this, I used two main survey questions. The first one, on average, how many days per week do you exercise? And the second one being, on a scale from 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with your physical progress in the past 3 months? The motivation behind this study came from a personal experience level and an observation. It was a bit of a last minute thing, kind of was able to switch it over and kind of help it resonate with my life and something that I find interesting, and that is working out. And so many gym goers nowadays, debate over how many days per week you need to train to feel satisfied with your progress. Some follow high frequency programs while others train less, but more intensely. So let's define a few key terms here. Training frequency is one of them, refers to the number of days per week someone, weight trains. Perceived progress is how satisfied someone feels about their physical improvements and gains in the gym, some say. Recreational fitness enthusiasts are non-professional individuals who regularly engage in fitness with some level of consistency. And a split refers to the way someone organizes their workout routine across the week. For example, a push-pull leg split, or an upper-lower split. An upper-lower is just upper body one day, lower body another day, depending on how often they work out. Same with push-pull legs. It'll be pushing movements one day, pulling movements another day, and just leg workouts on the third day. And so, split, is just basically where each muscle group is trained on a separate day. Let's get into the survey and design and data collection. This survey was distributed to a group of 30 young adults between the ages of 18 and 30 who meet certain criteria. This is the criteria that they had to meet. They train at least 3 times a week. They follow a structured training program, and they maintain some type of degree, they maintain a diet to some degree. They maintain some degree of dietary awareness and, monitor what they're consuming in their body for their health. This population was chosen to help control for outliers such as people with no structure or consistency. The survey questions were all multiple choice or used clearly defined ratings scales. There were no open-ended questions to minimize misinterpretation. Data was collected using Google Forms and then cleaned and prepared for analysis using StatCrunch. Let's get into some data summaries. And we can begin by reviewing the summary statistics. This histogram table kind of shows how many days per week participants reported training. Most people train between 4 and 6 days, with the most frequent response being 4 days. This shows that our sample leans slightly toward high-frequency training. But when we get a closer look, you can see, the average number of training days per week was approximately 4.83. The median was 5 days, meaning that half of the participants trained more than 5 days and half trained less than 5 days. The mode was 4 days. This was the most common of everything. The standard deviation was 1.21, which measures how spread out the data is around the mean. This suggests that while there is some variation, most people fell relatively close to the average number of training days. Next, we could take a look at the training experience. We asked participants how long they've been training consistently, and here's the breakdown that we got. We got 6 respondents that have been training for less than 6 months, 7 that have been training for 6 months and a year, both 6 months and a year, another 7 that have been training for 1 to 2 years, another 6 that have been training between 2 and 5 years, and 4 that have been training for 5 years or over. This tells us we have a fairly balanced range of experience levels, with the majority being in the beginner to intermediate category. We can take a look at some of the satisfaction ratings. Participants were asked how satisfied they are with their physical progress on a scale from 1 to 10. The average satisfaction rating was 6.77, suggesting a general trend of moderate satisfaction. The standard deviation was about 2.23. It was about 2.292. I'm not sure why I rounded up, but indicating some spread in the responses. While many respondents reported satisfaction levels around 7 or 8, others reported significantly lower or higher ratings, highlighting personal differences in perceived progress. Now let's take a look at some of the training goals. We ask each person to pick the one goal that best represented their focus. You can take a look at some of the focuses there. The most common response was hypertrophy, with 9 individuals selecting this. Strength and athletic performance both had 6 respondents. General health was chosen by 5 people, weight loss by 3, and only 1 person selected other. This breakdown reveals that most people in our survey are training for physique-related reasons, with others focused on performance, health, and weight reduction. We also asked participants what type of training split they follow. The most common was a bro split. What classifies as a bro split is basically just choosing a body part to focus on each day with no real correlation to each day. There's no structure behind it. They're kind of just choosing which body part, they want to go with day by day, and they kind of stick on that schedule. For an example, it would be like Monday would be biceps, Tuesday would be triceps, etc. Next one was push-pull legs, full body, and other, which had 6 responses each. Upper and lower split was chosen by 5 people. This shows that people use a variety of training styles without one dominant method. It reflects how training preferences and split type can be highly individual. Is your current split effective? We asked participants whether they felt their current split was effective. 26 people responded yes, while only 4 responded no. That's over 85% reporting satisfaction with their current approach, suggesting that perceived program effectiveness is quite high among consistent gym goers. This box plot breaks down satisfaction scores by the number of days trained each week. We can see that most days show moderate to high satisfaction, especially for those training 5 or 6 days. There are a few outliers, especially in the 3 and 4 day groups, indicating some dissatisfaction or high variation in those groups. This helps us explore whether more frequent training actually improves satisfaction or not. Let's move on to our hypothesis test. To determine if training frequency has a meaningful effect on perceived progress, we need to set up a hypothesis test. The goal was to compare satisfaction levels between 2 groups, those who trained fewer than 5 days per week and those who trained 5 or more. We began by stating our hypothesis. For the null hypothesis, there is no significant difference in perceived progress between individuals who train fewer than 5 days per week and those who train 5 or more days per week. Alternative hypothesis, there is a significant difference in perceived progress between the 2 groups. So that's what we came up with. This setup allows us to evaluate whether any difference in average satisfaction between these groups is large enough to rule out random variation. With these 2 groups, we ran a 2-sample t-test to compare their satisfaction ratings. After running the 2-sample t-test, which is used to determine whether there's a statistically significant difference between the means of 2 independent groups, we found that the mean satisfaction rating for individuals training fewer than 5 days per week was lower than those lower than for those training 5 or more days per week. The difference in average satisfaction rating between the two groups was approximately negative 0.67 points on the 10-point satisfaction scale. The standard error of this difference was 0.83 points, which reflects the expected variability in the difference of means due to sampling. The degrees of freedom for the test were approximately 25.54, which reflects the amount of information available to estimate variability in the data. The statistics was calculated as negative 0.81, which measures how far the observed difference between groups' means is from zero in terms of standard error. This result tells us the difference in satisfaction ratings is small and falls well within the range of what we might expect by random variation alone. Finally, the p-value for the test was 0.426, a p-value that tells us how likely it is to observe our results, or something more extreme, if the null hypothesis were actually true. Since this p-value is greater than the standard threshold of 0.05, we fail to reject the null hypothesis. This indicates that the difference in satisfaction scores between the two training frequencies groups is not statistically significant and could easily be due to random variation rather than a true effect of training frequency. This means that though there may be small differences between the groups, those differences could easily be due to random chance. We can get into some confidence intervals now. And to better understand the variability in satisfaction, we also calculated 95% confidence intervals for each group. A confidence interval gives a range of values that is likely to contain the true population mean, and it helps us understand the precision of our sample estimates. For those training fewer than 5 days per week, the mean satisfaction was about 6.38 with a standard deviation of 2.29. For those training 5 or more days, the mean was 7.06 with the standard deviation of 2.22. This means fall relatively close together, and the standard deviations show that both groups have fairly wide variation. Since the difference between means is less than 1 point and spreads overlap, this reinforces our earlier conclusion. There isn't strong evidence to suggest that training more frequently leads to significantly higher satisfaction. Moving on to correlation and regression analysis, we can take a look at the relationship between training frequency and satisfaction. Each dot on this scatter plot represents one person's satisfaction rating and how many days per week they train. We also added a regression line, which helps us see the overall trend. The equation for the line is satisfaction equals 6.56 plus 0.043 times training days. This tells us that for each individual day of training, satisfaction is predicted to increase only about 0.043 points, which is a very small change. The p-value for this regression is 0.9022, which is a much greater than 0.05. That means this small increase is not statistically significant. It could just be due to random chance. We also looked at the correlation coefficient, or R, which was about 0.023. This value measures the strength and direction of a linear relationship between two variables. Values closer to 1 or -1 indicate a strong relationship, which values near 0 show little to no connection. This number is very close to 0, showing there's almost no correlation between how often someone trains and how satisfied they feel. In simple terms, our data shows that training more often doesn't necessarily lead to higher satisfaction. People have different experiences, and other factors might play a bigger role in how they feel about their progress. In conclusion, to wrap everything up, we can go over what we found. After running all of our tests and visualizing the data, we saw that there wasn't a strong relationship between how many days per week someone trains and how satisfied they are with their physical progress. Even though the people who trained 5 or more days a week had a slightly higher average satisfaction rating, about 7.06 compared to 6.38 for those training fewer than 5 days. The difference between the two wasn't statistically significant. It could have easily been due to random variation in our samples. So based on this survey, our analysis training more often doesn't guarantee you'll feel more satisfied with your results. This was a bit surprising at first, but it makes sense when you think about how many other factors go into perceived progress. Things like recovery, nutrition, individual goals, and mental attitude. If I were to improve this study, I'd collect data from a larger and more diverse group of people, and I'd probably include more detailed questions about their program style, diet, life schedule, and even sleep habits. That would help paint a fuller picture of what really drives satisfaction in fitness. Working through this project, I also saw how useful statistics can be for digging into real-world questions. It helped me learn that data doesn't always confirm your assumptions, and that even when results seem obvious, the number can tell a more complex story. This process has given me a deeper appreciation for how much thought and structure goes into collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data the right way, as I can review answers that may not have been expected. Thank you.